Now, when I look at the 3.19 release and I think about the things that I am the most excited about, out of everything, it has to be the three leagues that are being reworked: Archnemesis, Beyond, and Harvest. Two of these are some of my biggest pain points when it comes to this game. Archnemesis seemed like it was forced into 3.18. In 3.17, it was just a simple map mechanic that you could interact with, or not if you didn't enjoy it, but in 3.18, it permeated every single bit of the game. All content was consumed by the fact that these Archnemesis mods were absolutely, completely overtuned. Now, regardless of whether you agree or not that they were overtuned, GDG did agree. The dev team decided that, yeah, they absolutely sent these in a completely overtuned manner, and they pulled way back on a lot of things. However, one of the big problems that the game was still suffering from with Archnemesis was that since it permeated every single bit of the game, side content was substantially more difficult with no increase in rewards. And that finally has been fixed. Now, on the other topic that I spoke of when we're talking about Harvest, Harvest has been a mechanic that I've always found very boring, but extremely impactful and powerful. It is still, to this day, one of the most powerful mechanics that exists in the game when it comes to raw player power. You can see this through people in the Gauntlet absolutely 100% focusing on Harvest early on because it makes their characters so powerful and it gives them so much control. But I'm gonna be honest with you, this mechanic, in my opinion, has never been fun. It has been a black hole void of time that just sucks up every single bit of fun that you can possibly have, but you feel that you need it to play the game the way that you want to. And hopefully, what they have done with this new patch is finally fix this problem with what I thought was the obvious answer from the get-go. Boys, I cannot understate how much that these mechanic changes that are happening mean for the game. Archnemesis and the change to rare monsters, and Harvest being opened up and being more accessible for people to use, and not having to use the TFT Discord to interact with Harvest anymore. These are massive changes that are going to make lower end, medium end, and even higher end crafting substantially more available to more people that didn't want to have to interact with, a whole bunch of random people on a Discord. So I am probably most excited about these changes out of everything else, and I want to deep dive into it, talk about each individual one, like the tainted currency that's coming back with Beyond, what the implications of all these harvest crafts are, maybe some problems that we could run into, things that you should be thinking about, and maybe changing up your early game Atlas strategy, because you might want to focus on some of this stuff. Now remember, boys, if you're enjoying this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos. Without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start out with the Archnemesis changes. These are big changes that are happening just to the game as a whole, not just Archnemesis as is. The big overview change is that they are changing the way that you're going to interact with rare monsters just in general in this game. Now rare monsters are going to feel more like a mini boss battle that you're running into with significant rewards, instead of it just seeming like, oh, there's a bunch of rare monsters in these maps and they're just super difficult and they don't really do anything for me. So they have taken one of my biggest gripes with the whole way that Archnemesis was introduced into the game, in that it added a lot of difficulty without adding any rewards for that difficulty. And now that's different. So what they've done here is they have lowered the number of rare and magic monsters that are just encountered through various league things. Like if you're thinking about mechanics like Beyond or Blights or Expedition, things like these aren't going to have so many rare magic monsters all at the same time. And now with the way that they've made this system, they have made it so that item quantity and item rarity matters for killing these rare monsters. So what they've done is they've made this special reward conversion system. And what this means is that each of the different powerful modifiers that a rare monster could have will impact the loot in a very specific way. So some examples that they've given here is that if it's got the Corruptor mod, all of the items that it drops are going to be corrupted. If it has the Solaris Touch mod, all of its items are going to be maps. And these modifiers can combine to where you will run into these extremely difficult encounters that have potentially insanely lucrative rewards. Judging just off of the things that they've shown us, there is a very big possibility that you will see clips going forward of people killing a crazy giant rare monster and it dropping like 6 unique jewels that are corrupted with all kinds of crazy implicits. This is a thing that can happen with this new system. It's going to be rare, but it can happen. Now, on top of this, you might have noticed that there were circumstances where a blue monster or a magic monster, a pack of those could be substantially more dangerous than a rare monster was, and that was because some of the modifiers and such that were on these monsters could be very dangerous when grouped up. So because of this, they have toned down and removed some of the modifiers that are on magic monsters and made them more just kind of stat bonuses that you're going to be running into. You're not going to get those situations where there's going to be like 800, a billion different things all happening at one time and exploding on your screen. Like Consecrator, for one, was one of the ones that was always very annoying to me because you couldn't get away from it. If you were having difficulty overcoming the damage on a pack of monsters that had Consecrator, it was just Consecrating around everywhere, and there's nothing that you could really do, so it was extremely frustrating. Another one that was very prevalent for me was the Lightning Mirage when hit. Magic monsters really don't need to have this because you're spawning like 8 or 9 or 10 of these Lightning Mirages when you're hitting these magic monsters, since there's so many of them, and they're just going all over the place. And Lightning Mirages are very difficult to see, extremely dangerous for melee characters, and can just kind of one-shot you out of nowhere without you really realizing what's going on, especially if you're not using sound. What a lot of people don't realize about a lot of these modifiers and a lot of things in PoE is that lack of sound effects is a huge detriment to your ability to survive. The Lightning Mirages have this like weird caustic sounding, like screechy, staticky sound that happens whenever they go off. So now that these aren't going to be so oppressive, it should feel quite a bit better. Another one that particularly annoyed me was the Sentinel modifier, as well as the Benevolent Guardian. These modifiers made it so that sometimes the enemies just straight up would not take any damage whatsoever. So they've normalized this how like the rest of the game works, in that they're going to take 20% of damage from hits that they block instead of just completely minimizing all damage that they take, which feels very frustrating most of the time. So this overall brings us to a situation where being able to do some amount of single target damage will be a little bit more important for mapping, as these large, crazy, powerful monsters are going to exist more often, but it is going to be rewarding in that fact. You can't just play a complete clear build very early on and expect to be okay with a lot of these very insane, very crazy rare monsters, which I think this is a very good change, because all I've ever wanted is that if there's difficulty in Path of Exile, that's fine. I enjoy the difficulty. Just reward us properly for that difficulty. The next league that's being changed is Beyond. Now, Beyond has been in the game for a long time, and there's been a lot of people who have used Beyond as kind of just like an infinite enemy generator. You might have seen the video that I did this last league where I was playing the Blade Vortex build, and I was doing like triple Beyond Omega Juice maps to the point where like my computer was freezing for 5 to 10 seconds at a time because there were so many enemies and so many calculations going on. It's obvious that this was a problem, right? I know there are a lot of people who enjoy doing those like big, giant, crazy farming strategies, but it's very obvious that there was a problem here, right? It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't something that anybody could really do because it would completely melt your computer. It probably was causing like fires at the GGG servers and all kinds of other issues. It was just problematic in general. It pushed everyone towards one specific farming style if they wanted to be as efficient as possible, if they wanted to get the most enemies in a map as possible, and it just really was problematic. So what they have done is they have taken what the Scourge was that we got in 3.16 and made those into the Beyond demons. So now the big takeaway from that is that the Scourge currency is back. This was the currency set that allowed people to interact with corrupted items. Particularly, the Tainted Fusings were one item that a lot of people really enjoyed because it made it easy to get 6-link corrupted unique body armors. This was very nice for a lot of people because the Tainted currency relieved a lot of pressure at the lower end to get some of these items. It brought down the price of, you know, like 6 links very, very steeply. So what they've done now is they've made it so that instead of having to kill a bunch of minions all in the same area, you don't have to pack in all those monsters into one little zone. The way that it works is that once you kill enough of these Beyond demons, enough of the Scourge demons, you will be able to spawn these bosses. And it's going to be a interesting boss encounter of, instead of it just being like, well, you spawn like 15 of the different Beyond bosses and you just fight them all at the same time, and you know, things just go crazy all over the place. It's gonna be one big boss, and you fight that, and once you finish off that boss, the Beyond is done for the map. So this is going to limit the amount of monsters that can physically spawn into a zone. It's not going to be this endless fiesta of people killing 500,000 bajillion monsters. But there are some downsides to this for some people. So if you remember in that video that I made, the farming strategy revolved around, delirium orbs and getting lots and lots and lots of delirium rewards by forcing all of these monsters and all these minions into one zone. That farming strategy is potentially less viable. However, I do feel that with like magic find builds and such, because quantity and rarity and such are going to impact rare monsters so powerfully now, I think that people at the top end will still be perfectly fine. They have also changed a couple of the ways that we're going to interact with Beyond now. One major thing is that chances to spawn Beyond monsters don't stack anymore. Basically, it just takes whatever the best one is. And one of the big things that I like is that the Scent of Blood notable that is on the Atlas now just grants a 10% chance for your maps to attract Beyond demons. This is really cool. If you are in that area of the Atlas, you can just take that notable and you'll see Beyond demons every once in a while. You'll be able to get some tainted currency and potentially even fight a boss. You don't have to think about it too much if you don't want to. So these Beyond changes should be really solid. It's going to give us the tainted currency back, although they have noted that they're not going to drop scourged items, and it doesn't look like scourging of items is coming back in any meaningful way. But the Beyond mobs changing into scourged mobs and getting the tainted currency back is a very, very positive thing for the game. However, do be aware that they have said adjustments have been made to the outcome odds for the Tainted Orb of Fusing, Jeweler's Orb, and Tainted Mythic Orb in order for these items to be suitable for core availability. So this means that we don't exactly know how good these currencies are going to be, so don't expect that it's just going to be super, super easy 6 links and everything all over again, but hopefully with this change, as well as the change to the 6-link recipe that we've gotten, where it's not going to be a Divine Orb anymore, it's going to be 20 fusings, 6-link should be a little bit more available for people, especially early on in the league. And now we get to the big change, the Harvest change. I am most excited for this because what this means is that now I can interact with these Harvest crafts without having to trade my item to another person from the TFT Discord and just trust that everything is going to go okay. You might have seen some clips of like prominent streamers and crafters and stuff just getting their items absolutely deleted because of people messing things up. Now, without having to worry about trading your items to other people and just being like, oh, well, I hope that they don't do anything wrong, we can just do them as we need and we don't have to worry about anything anymore. The way that Harvest is going to work is that now when you go into a Harvest, you're going to just kill a whole bunch of enemies. Those enemies have been adjusted for the rare changes like they said before. Those enemies are going to drop a life force, and that life force juice that we get will be able to be used on crafts. Now this is actually something that I suggested almost immediately after Harvest came out, so I'm super glad that they've gone with this, but it just seemed like the obvious path, right? Like this seemed like the very, very obvious thing to do. It fixes almost all of the problems presented by Harvest. Right now in the game in 3.18, Harvest has like all these layers of obfuscation that you have to go through, and a new player or a casual player would almost never be able to figure out how to safely get an item, go onto TFT, trade it to somebody else to do the craft, to even know what the craft is supposed to be, know that they're not getting there's just so many layers of crazy things going on there that it's almost impossible for someone to really figure this out from start to finish without getting scammed at some point along the line. One other big change is that they are making it so that the tier 4 bosses as well as Oshabi are going to be much more important to be killing, because these tier 4 bosses and Oshabi are going to be dropping special life forces that we need for the very, very high-end crafts. I'm sure that they have adjusted the prices and such of a lot of these very, very high tier expensive crafts to be, not cheap. Now, one other thing to think about here is that the Harvest crafting options have been overhauled in this regard. They are not as powerful as they were before at the very, very top end. There are going to be downsides for these very, very, very high tier crafts. Like one that I think I remember from the reveal was that Chris said that the Harvest slam that now does, like, it like slams like a chaos or a physical or a fire or something like that, it also removes a random mod at the same time. So we're gonna have to be aware of that. You should still be able to interact with it positively with meta mods, but it isn't going to just be like a free ride, essentially. And if you do have any Harvest crafts that you're planning on keeping, get rid of them now, because they're just going to be straight up gone in 3.19. One last note on the Harvest stuff is that anything that was obtained specifically through Harvest has been moved to their designated areas, like the dedication gift and tribute to the goddess that you would use to get into the Uber labs. Those have just been moved to the end of normal Uber lab. and other things like that either have been removed or moved to their viable areas. And that is going to be it for the video. Easily some of the most exciting changes out of everything that we've gotten so far. I am very excited to not have to interact with TFT when it comes to harvest crafting. I basically just didn't really do any harvest crafting besides stuff from my, own just like trying to find like a reroll fizz or something like that, because I didn't want to have to go through the headache of finding some random person and verifying that they're an okay person to trade with and then trading the item with them and maybe having to get collateral because of it. I didn't want to have to worry about all that stuff, and now I don't have to anymore. I can go to the trade website, I can buy a whole bunch of whatever juice that I need and just do the craft myself and not have to think about it. A significantly better environment for Harvest, a much less scam baiting environment for Harvest or people messing up your items, and no need for any of that anymore. And then we're getting the tainted currency back, which should be pretty cool, and the changes to rare mobs and being able to kill rare mobs in maps now for items is really going to be a very nice set of changes. Remember, boys, if you're enjoying this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in Ray class, and I'll see you guys in 3.19 Lake of Kalandra.